$213 million. That's the number the U.S. Navy just attached to a single contract. The company on the receiving end is Boeing. The job, reconfigure a fleet of P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft, the jets the Navy relies on to hunt submarines, track surface shipping, and gather intelligence over open ocean in every ocean around the clock. RETENTIONCHECKPOINT, 0 o'clock hook. That's the confirmed fact, reported by Clearance Jobs, a publication that tracks U.S. defense contracting announcements, a contract award, a dollar figure, a company, an aircraft type, 4 solid data points. Everything past that, what reconfigure actually touches, which systems are involved, how many aircraft are covered, and on what timeline hasn't been made public. That gap between what's confirmed and what's simply assumed is where this story actually lives, and it's what we're going to walk through carefully today. RETENTIONCHECKPOINT, 030 resolution Ts. Let's start with exactly what has been reported, because in defense contracting, precision matters more than drama. According to the announcement covered by Clearance Jobs, Boeing has been awarded a $213 million contract by the U.S. Navy tied to reconfiguration work on the P-8A Poseidon. The report doesn't specify which squadrons, which tail numbers, or which mission systems are affected. It doesn't give a completion date. It doesn't describe the scope of the physical or software changes involved. What it confirms is the award itself, the amount, the awardee, and the platform. A contract of this size, going by typical Navy procurement patterns, sits comfortably in the range of a fleet-wide modification or a multi-aircraft mission system update rather than a one-off repair. That's an inference from general contracting patterns, though not a confirmed detail of this specific award, and we want to be upfront about that distinction from the start. So what is the P-8A Poseidon, and why does the Navy keep spending money to reconfigure it? Here's the factual background, clearly separated from anything specific to this contract. The P-8A is built on the airframe of the Boeing 737, specifically a modified 737-800, which makes it one of the few frontline military aircraft derived directly from a commercial airliner. The Navy adopted it starting in 2013 as the replacement for the P-3 Orion, a propeller-driven patrol aircraft that had been in service since the 1960s. The P-8A's primary missions are anti-submarine warfare, anti-surface warfare, and intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, often shortened to ASW, ASWEL, and ISR in Navy documents and defense reporting. In plain terms, it listens for and tracks submarines, it watches and identifies ships on the surface, and it collects and relays information back to commanders, sometimes over hundreds of miles of open water. To do that job, the P-8A carries a mix of sensors and weapons. It has a surface search radar. It drops sonobuoys, small floating listening devices that detect submarines acoustically and relay that data back to the aircraft's processing systems. And it can carry Mark 54 torpedoes and Harpoon anti-ship missiles. Unlike its propeller-driven predecessor, it doesn't carry a magnetic anomaly detector, the boom-mounted sensor older patrol aircraft used to sense the metal hull of a submerged submarine. The Navy made a deliberate trade-off towards speed, range, and networked sensor fusion instead of that older detection method. That's a well-documented design choice in the P-8A program generally, not something specific to this new contract. It's simply useful background for understanding what kind of aircraft is being reconfigured. I spent a good chunk of time going through past P-8A contracting history to understand where a reconfiguration award like this one usually fits, and one detail kept standing out. This isn't the first time Boeing has been paid to modify aircraft it already delivered. RETENTIONCHECKPOINT, research angle personal phrase. The P-8A program has gone through a series of what the Navy calls increments. Increment 2, delivered in the mid-2010s, added a high-altitude anti-submarine warfare capability built around sonobuoys dropped from higher altitudes, which extends the aircraft's search radius and lets it operate at range from potential threats. Increment 3, which followed, focused on upgrading radar processing and refining the open architecture mission computing system that lets new software and sensors be added without replacing the whole aircraft. Those are documented, publicly reported upgrade paths for the P-8A program in general. Whether this new $213 million contract falls under a further increment, a midlife sensor refresh, a software-only mission system update, or something else entirely, the source material simply doesn't say, and neither will we pretend to know. It also helps to understand, in general terms, how the Navy structures a contract like this one before it ever reaches a public announcement. Aircraft modification work of this kind is typically issued as an engineering change proposal against an existing contract vehicle, or as a task order under an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity arrangement that the Navy and Boeing already have in place for P-8A sustainment. That's standard federal acquisition practice for platforms that stay in production and in service simultaneously, and it isn't unique to this award. It means a contract like this one rarely appears out of nowhere. It usually sits downstream of years of prior sustainment agreements between the same two parties, which is part of why the dollar figure alone doesn't tell you much about the scope of the physical work without the underlying statement of work attached to it. There's a second, more mundane obstacle that shows up constantly in defense, contracting reporting, and it's worth naming here too. Funding timing. RETENTION Obstacle 2. Congress funds the Department of Defense through annual appropriations, and when a new fiscal year begins without a finalized budget, the Pentagon often operates under what's called a continuing resolution, which generally freezes spending at prior year levels and restricts New START programs. Reporters and analysts who cover defense contracting regularly note that this pattern can delay exactly the kind of midlife modification contract we're discussing here, sometimes by months, simply because of when in the fiscal calendar a program office is able to finalize an award. Nothing in the source reporting on this particular $213 million contract mentions a funding delay, and we're not suggesting one occurred. This is general context on why contract timing in defense reporting is often less meaningful than it first appears, and why we'd caution against reading too much into the specific month an award like this lands. Here's an obstacle worth naming honestly. Defense reporting on contract awards like this one is often intentionally thin. RETENTIONCHECKPOINT. Obstacle 1. Contracting announcements are frequently limited to what the Department of Defense's daily contract announcements require: award amount, contractor name, a brief description of the work, and sometimes a completion date, while the technical content of the modification stays in program office documents that aren't released publicly, sometimes for operational security reasons and sometimes simply because the Navy doesn't routinely publish that level of detail for sustainment work. The workaround, if you can call it that, isn't guessing. It's reading the contract language exactly as written, cross-referencing it against what's already known about the P-8A program's public upgrade history, and being explicit about where the public record stops. That's what we're doing here. What strikes us most, looking at contracts like this one, is how ordinary they actually are, even when the dollar figure sounds large. $213 million is a serious sum of money by any household measure, but against the total life cycle cost of a maritime patrol aircraft fleet that the Navy expects to fly for decades, a midlife reconfiguration contract of this size is closer to routine sustainment than to a dramatic capability leap. The interesting story here is less Boeing wins big new deal and more, here's how the machinery of keeping a 2013-era airframe relevant into the 2030s and beyond actually works, line item by line item. Now, here's the take that will probably get us some pushback in the comments. We think the U.S. defense procurement system leans too comfortably on sole source, single vendor contracts for aircraft like the P-8A, even when the justification that Boeing built the airframe and holds the technical data package is completely reasonable on paper. It is reasonable. It's also exactly the kind of arrangement that removes competitive pricing pressure over the life of a program, and contracts like this one rarely get the public scrutiny that an initial aircraft purchase does, because reconfiguration work sounds procedural rather than newsworthy. That's our opinion, not a claim about this specific contract being overpriced or improperly awarded. There's nothing in the public record suggesting that. It's a broader observation about how sustainment contracting tends to draw less attention than it probably deserves. So here's a real question, and we mean it. Do you think reconfiguration and sustainment contracts like this one should get the same level of public disclosure as a brand new aircraft purchase, or is keeping the technical detail out of public view a legitimate operational security call? RETENTIONCHECKPOINT. Viewer question. Tell us where you land on that, because it's genuinely a judgment call, not an obvious answer either way. Any P-8A related contract sits inside a larger, well-documented pattern. RETENTION CHECKPOINT 50% mid-roll hook. Naval News and USNI News have both reported extensively over the past several years on renewed attention to anti-submarine warfare among Western navies, tied to increased submarine activity reported in the North Atlantic and the broader expansion of undersea fleets in the Indo-Pacific. NATO allies, including the United Kingdom, Norway, and Germany, have all purchased their own P-8A fleets in the past decade, and Australia, India, New Zealand, and South Korea operate or have ordered the aircraft as well, making the P-8A one of the most widely adopted maritime patrol platforms among U.S. allies. That's well-established public record about the broader program, not a claim about why this specific contract was awarded now. The source material doesn't state a strategic rationale for the timing, and neither will we invent one. Put yourself for a second in the position of a Navy program manager overseeing a fleet that has to keep flying reliably for another 2 decades while the threat picture underneath it keeps shifting. RETENTIONCHECKPOINT. Viewer projection personal phrase. Every reconfiguration contract like this one is a bet that the money spent now keeps the aircraft relevant against submarines and sensors that don't exist yet. That's not dramatic. It's also, honestly, the unglamorous core of how modern military aviation actually stays capable, not through a single dramatic weapons reveal, but through a long chain of contracts exactly like this $213 million award. There's a detail in how these reconfiguration announcements are worded that has stuck with us across a lot of these stories. The word itself, reconfigure, is doing a lot of quiet work. It can mean a sensor swap. It can mean a full mission system software rebuild. It can mean structural changes to accommodate a new weapon or pod. Without the underlying statement of work, the word is a placeholder for a category of change, not a description of one. That's exactly the kind of vagueness a factual reporting channel like this one is built to flag rather than paper over with a confident-sounding guess. So, where does this actually stand as of today, July 29th, 2026? Confirmed. The U.S. Navy has awarded Boeing a $213 million contract connected to reconfiguration of P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft, as reported by Clearance Jobs. Confirmed as general background and not specific to this award, the P-8A is a 737 derived maritime patrol aircraft that replaced the P-3 Orion starting in 2013. It performs anti-submarine warfare, anti-surface warfare, and intelligence surveillance reconnaissance missions, and the Navy has funded incremental upgrades to the platform's sensors and mission systems throughout its service life. Not confirmed. The specific systems being reconfigured under this new award, the number of aircraft involved, the contract's start and completion dates, and any stated strategic rationale tied to current regional tensions. We cut a tangent from this video for length. A deeper look at how the P-8A's open architecture mission computer actually lets the Navy add new sensors without a full airframe overhaul, and how that compares to the far more closed, harder to upgrade systems on the retired P-3 Orion. RETENTIONCHECKPOINT. Engagement hook intentional omission. If you want that follow-up, tell us in the comments, because we read every one of them before deciding what to cover next. If you want to check any of this yourself rather than take our word for it, the primary sources are public. The U.S. Department of Defense publishes daily contract announcements on defense. Gov, which is where awards like this one are first logged in official language. Clearance Jobs, which broke this particular report, covers defense and cleared industry contracting news specifically. USNI News and Naval News both maintain deep, searchable archives on the P-8A program's acquisition history, including past increment upgrades. And the Federal Procurement Data System, maintained by the General Services Administration, lets anyone search historical contract obligations by contractor name, so you can look at Boeing's P-8A-related awards over time and see this one in that broader context. Until the technical scope of this contract becomes public, if it ever does, since not every reconfiguration award gets a detailed follow-up report, the honest answer to what is Boeing actually doing to these aircraft is, we don't fully know yet, and the responsible thing to do is say so clearly rather than fill the gap with a story that sounds better than the facts support. That's the whole discipline of this channel. And it's the reason a video about a $213 million line item can still be worth a few minutes of your time. If you want factual, sourced breakdowns of naval and maritime defense developments as they get reported, not dramatized, not speculative, that's exactly what this channel does, story by story, contract by contract. We'll keep tracking this one, and if the technical scope of the P-8A reconfiguration becomes public, we'll bring you that update with the same sourcing standard we just used here.